Oh man, it's been a great morning so far. Man, it's funny sometimes how you can take something as iconic as Christmas and Easter, both equally iconic, but then when you bring them together in the full power of what those two, the connection that those two iconic events in history, when you look at them through the lens of the other, it's amazing how powerful it is. Several years ago, I was actually sitting with somebody one time when we were actually talking about what we were going to do, or what they were doing at their church for Christmas and Easter and all. They were planning like way further in advance than I do. But he had already decided that for Christmas and Easter that year, he was going to flip-flop. At Easter, he was going to go through a series about Christmas. And at Christmas, he was going to go through a series about Easter, and showing how the two were intertwined. And it was just really kind of a neat concept. And it got me thinking about it, and just, how interconnected the two are. Because really, in all honesty, and I know Blake already said this, but without the cross, without the death, the resurrection, Christmas would just be another day. But without Christmas, there would be no perfect Son of God to be offered as a sacrifice for us. You literally cannot have one without the other. It's just amazing to me, the way God thinks everything through, and the way that all these things kind of come together. It's just amazing. If this is your first week here, you're jumping in on part 3 of a series we've been doing called We Need Christmas. And just kind of get you caught up to date as far as where we've been and what we've been talking about is we've talked a lot about the timing of Christmas. As human beings, we like to know when something's coming. Some people like surprises, but for the most part, when it comes to big things, we kind of like to be able to prepare ourselves. We like to know when it's coming. On the negative side of that, we like to, if we have a doctor's appointment and we're going to have shots or whatever as we're kids, we like to prepare ourselves and know what's coming. My kids love to ask questions, so what's it going to be like? How is it going to work? How's it going to function? What am I going to experience? And they can kind of prepare for it. But we all love those moments when there's a birthday coming for us, or we know we're going on a special vacation, or there's a special meal that we're going to go eat together, that we anticipate it. For us in our home, yesterday, we actually woke up and we were sitting around just kind of looking at how our day was going to go, and one of my girls disappeared, and all of us sitting around the living room got a text and said, "You are personally invited to have lunch with me at the Mexican trailer, and I'm buying." And I looked at my phone, I'm like, who in the world is this? And I look at it, and it was Sophie. Some of you know from being at the Harvest Sunday that we did that Sophie makes blankets and stuff. She finger knits blankets. They're amazing. They're super comfortable. This is not me plugging and saying you need to go buy one or anything like that. It's just, but she has done so well with it that she was able to take our entire family out to lunch yesterday, and so it was really cool. And so we were able to anticipate it all day long yesterday. This was Friday. Not yesterday. Friday. But we were able to look at it and be able to look forward to it, knowing it was coming. It was something we were anticipating because we all love Mexican food. Primarily the white cheese dip and the chori cheese, but we love to go and eat out together as a family because we don't do it very often. And so when we do, it's a time where we can just sit together. And the fact that she personally said, "I want to buy you guys dinner," made it even more special. And so we were able to look at it and anticipate it all day long. And in kind of the same way, we anticipate things like Christmas. We anticipate things like family gatherings. Sometimes the anticipation is good. Sometimes it's bad, but anticipating it helps us to know that it's coming. And in the first week of the series, we talked about the idea that even Christmas was set up way in advance. And the nation of Israel had been anticipating it from the very beginning. When you go all the way back to the beginning of the nation of Israel, it was actually built and started to be able to grow and become close to God through a covenant that was made with Moses when the nation of Israel was liberated from Egypt. While they were in the wilderness wandering around, while they were there, God made a covenant with Moses. We know it as the 10 Commandments. He said, if you do these 10 things and you follow these rules, these regulations, you will be my people and I will be your God. But over the course of time, that became something that there was no way humanity could ever live up to. And God, knowing that, used that first covenant to lay the groundwork for the second covenant that he was going to create, one that he actually mentioned to the nation of Israel through the prophet Jeremiah. We looked at this passage of scripture in the first week. It's not on the computer, it's not in the screens, but just to recap what it was a promise that God made where he said, I am going to write my law on your heart. I am going to take everything that you know, I'm going to make it so that it can be internalized, it will become part of you, and that law will become your righteousness. He even went as far as to say, I am sending someone who is going to take the place of the current high priest. He's going to sit on the throne of David forever and ever and ever, and that Lord will become your righteousness in front of me. Talking as time progressed, we realized that he was talking about Jesus. So this covenant was something that was completely new. It was something that had not existed before. But this covenant spoke to a person with a never-ending reign. It spoke of a permanent high priest that would become our righteousness. And we talked about the fact that even with everything going on around us, the truth remains that we need Christmas because we need Jesus. When we walked away from that first week, the very thing that we left with was that idea that we need Jesus we need Christmas because we need Jesus. We as human beings, because of the things that we interact, that we experience, we tend to sometimes just cut it off. I don't want to celebrate Christmas, I just want to skip over it. But the truth is that we need Christmas because we need Jesus just as much now as they did then. And then last week we talked about this idea that there's these different emotions that happen through Christmas, whether it's the eyes of a child lighting up when they see the Christmas lights, or the eyes of a 42-year-old man with a salt and pepper beard and hair that lights up every time he hears the first Christmas song, or the giggles that happen when a child is just running and seeing everything that happens, or when it's the excitement over a gift that they asked for, or even the shock that they experience when they get something that they never really asked for and probably didn't want. Each of those emotions are deeply rooted in Christmas, and we tend to think of joy, but the reality is that the one that is the most deeply rooted in Christmas is this idea of shock and awe. You go, well, wait a minute. Well, if you weren't here, let me kind of explain what I'm talking about. Last week we looked at really 4 individual characters in the Christmas story. We looked at Mary, Joseph, Elizabeth, who was Mary's cousin, and the baby who would eventually become John the Baptist that Elizabeth was carrying. The first 3, Mary, Elizabeth, and Joseph, all experienced shock. There was all this moment of like, oh my goodness, what is going on? But it was only the baby, only John that exhibited joy. Only he recognized the baby for who it was, which kind of lends back to the statement that Jesus made when he said, unless you come to me as a child, you can never see the kingdom of heaven. Unless you experience him the way that baby did, knowing instantly who he was and reacting to who he was, you would never be able to experience heaven. And so we walked away from the whole thing going, okay, if joy is something we're supposed to experience at Christmas, that if we want to experience that joy, if we want to experience the joy of Christmas, then we have to put Christ first. We have to look past our circumstances. We have to look past all the things that have happened to us and turn our focus and our attention on Jesus so that we can truly experience the joy of Christmas for what it is. Now, in our lives, in our world, we have so many things that happen and that go on this time of year. We have the Christmas parties. We have the crowds. Some of you probably were down at the parade last night, and just the number of people that are there. Christmas parties, the people from work that are gathering around, the social obligations, and let's be honest, the stress that comes with Christmas. Because we start stressing over whether or not we're going to have the right gift, whether we're going to have the right food. We're stressing over whether or not this person is going to be there, whether or not this person is going to be around. What's their reaction going to be if they don't get what they were hoping for? What's their reaction going to be if I don't say the right thing? We look at everything that's going on at Christmas. We look at every single thing that's going on, and it makes our heads spin. Raquel and I sat down like in the first part of November, and we started looking up into the holidays through the month of November on into December, and we were looking at everything that's going on, and we were like, we're going to be like ridiculously busy. We're going to be so busy. And so we start looking at it, and it starts stressing us out. But there's another emotion. You know, last week we talked about the emotions of Christmas. There's another one that creeps into our world. And when it does, you know, all these things start happening, and we're like, I got to find some time to catch a breath. I feel like I can't breathe. I feel like I'm drowning because of everything that's going on. We can't sleep because we're so stressed over the things that are happening around us and the things that are going to happen or may not happen. And anxiety comes in, and it grabs a hold of us. And it grabs a hold of our heart and our mind, and we become to feel completely overwhelmed. Whether it's the anxieties of the things that are going on that we have scheduled ourselves with, or whether it's the anxiety of things that we can't do anything about. But what happens is we look at the manger, okay? We look at this. We look at the manger. We see the baby in the manger. We look and we see the story and we read it and we just go, I don't deserve it. Because see, there's a different kind of anxiety and stress that comes with the holiday than there is when we actually start looking at what Christmas is and begin to connect it to Easter. Because we look at those two things, the fact that the God of creation shrunk himself down to a baby to live a life that would ultimately pave the way for him to actually die on a cross to pay for our sins. So that the relationship between God and man could be healed and restored and put back together for those who believe in him. Okay? We look at that stress and we go, I don't deserve it. I am too far gone. And then we look at Christmas and we just kind of pull back from the story of Christmas because we feel like we don't deserve it. We feel like we've done too much. Well, you know what, the whole Jesus thing, I get it, but you don't know what I've done. I have done this and this and this and this and this. I don't deserve that. Or maybe you feel like you've lost too much. You know what? This relationship here is broken and severed. My marriage has fallen apart. My relationship with my kids is gone. The relationship with my spouse, we're still married, but we're just roommates. Or maybe even you look at the relationship between you and the rest of your family. Or you look at the relationship between you and the people in your church. Or you look at the relationships between you and just everybody else you come in contact with. Or maybe there's someone that you lost this year that you are just so bitter and angry over because you are just too hurt, too deep inside to even begin to even think about what the actual story of Christmas is and what it leads to. Maybe, just maybe, you sit back and you go, you know what? I just have too many people holding me back and holding me down. I'm too stressed and too frustrated to be able to even think about what a baby in a manger that eventually ends up in a tomb means for me. It's too much. I don't deserve it anyway, so I'm just not even going to think about it or focus on it. Can I tell you a secret? You know what? It's not even a secret. Let me just pull the scales off your eyes. The world that you live in right now, all of those things that you are experiencing, all of those things that make you pull back and say, I don't deserve it, is the exact same world that Isaiah and Jeremiah, the two prophets that we've looked at through this series, it's the same world that they lived in. Nothing has changed. We are still broken people living in a broken world, whether you are a believer or a non-believer, whether you have laid your heart in the hands of Christ or whether you are sitting back guarding it because you're too afraid to let go of it because you don't deserve it. But it's the same world. Nothing has changed. Human beings still hurt people. They still break relationships. They still get angry. They still get bitter. They still live. They still die. Nothing has changed. Everything that we experience now is still there. And it's the same world that Jeremiah and Isaiah lived in when they began to speak and be the mouthpiece for God, telling people that there is a Messiah, there is a Savior that is coming to make things better. The problem is we think when we hear that there is someone coming, that he has come to make things perfect here. And that's not the case. He's just come to make it tolerable for us until we find perfection in heaven. Okay? So what is God's response to that? When we say, God, I am too hurt, I'm too broken, I'm too angry, I'm too bitter, I have too much pride, I have too much sin, I have too much everything that's keeping me from you, and I don't deserve it. I just need you to just step back. God's response was this. In Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, okay, Isaiah is speaking about the coming Messiah. He's speaking about the coming Savior. And he says this, he said, "For unto us is born, for unto us a child is born, to us a son is given." And I'll explain what a lot of this looks like in a minute, but he says, "And the government will be upon his shoulder." Okay? The government is going to be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Caden, hang on right here for just a second, Prince of Peace, okay? God is taking every single one of these things that we deal with, okay? Every single thing that we have in our lives that drives us and that we can fall short in, okay? He says, this person that's coming, he's going to be the Wonderful Counselor because you've been listening to some advice that has pushed you in the direction that you don't need to go in. He's going to be the Mighty God because the God that you have put in your place to take my place is weak. He said he's going to be the Everlasting Father because your father here on earth has let you down and possibly walked away. But he also says this. His name will be called Prince of Peace. Not Prince of Stress, not Prince of Anxiety, not Prince of not feeling good enough about yourself, not Prince of self-esteem, self-worth, not Prince of Perfection, but Prince of Peace. Okay? Now, in the New Testament, the book of John in chapter 14, verse 27, Jesus says this. He says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you, so don't let your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid." He says, "Peace I leave you. My peace I give to you." This is something completely different than what we think of, because when we think of peace, we think of that like, all is well in the world, and I am at peace with those around me and myself. This is not what this is talking about. The biblical understanding of peace and what we think about of peace are two totally different things. When you look at peace in the Bible, it's a unifying of the mind and the heart. Okay? It's a unifying, bringing what you know and what you believe and bringing them together in such a way that it changes and alters the way that you approach life. Okay? It's a moment where what you experience and what you know, it goes back to this whole idea of spirit and truth that we talked about in the last series. We worship God and we praise God in truth because of what he's done. We worship God because of who he is. When this idea of peace is put in place, it's a unifying of the mind and the heart. It's not split because of emotions. This goes deeper than what we feel. It goes deeper than what we actually think about. It's that point in time where we bring what we believe and what we know, and the two come together. Okay? And this is something, he says, my peace I give to you. This is a peace that is lasting. This is not something that is temporary. When we have peace in our world and we're just like, it can be gone in 5 minutes. If you've ever lived in a house with toddlers that are quiet for a few minutes, eventually you're going to realize it's too quiet, something is wrong. There's too much peace in the house right now. And you get up and you go look and you realize that peace is no longer existing because everything that they own is pulled out in the middle of the floor and there's chalk on the walls and chocolate milk on the ceiling somehow. But the peace that we feel like we are longing for, that peace is temporary. It goes away just as quick as we get it. That peace comes and it is gone, it has disappeared. Jesus followed up by encouraging us not to let ourselves get worked up over what we honestly had no control over to begin with. Wait. What do you mean? A lot of the things that we get worked up over are things that we have no control over. We think, well, I wanted to go walk the neighborhood in Christmas Carol and it started raining. Well, get over it. You have no control over the weather. You have no control over how people treat you outside the walls of your family. You have no control over how somebody reacts to a gift that you give them. You have no way to control what your boss thinks of you and asks you to do leading up to Christmas. You have no control over those things. That is not, having control over those things brings a temporary peace. Okay? Those things are kind of a weird thing. Now, peace itself, this idea of peace, is at the heart of Christmas itself because Israel was lacking the same kind of peace that we lack in our world today. Israel was always on the very edge of being at total war with everybody else around them. There was the stress and the anxiety of not knowing when someone was going to come in and invade. There was always this internal and external strife that was going on. The internal of having to battle back and forth over whether or not God was pleased with them, and the external strife of having to figure out, are they okay with me? Are they okay with me? Are they going to just come across through the gates of the city and burn everything to the ground? There was always this back and forth that was going on. And then Jesus came specifically to shift the focus. We said it last week. He came to shift the focus away from the circumstances and bring it back to God. And bring it back ultimately to Him. We've talked about this before. If the idea is that Jesus came to bring us peace and make it possible for us to have this unifying of what we believe and what we know so that we can find peace, how in the world does that work? Well, Isaiah said he would be called the Prince of Peace, right? We did a word study on one of the names of Jesus, and it was found right here in Prince of Peace. And it actually translates all the way back to that he is in charge of and in control of dispensing and dispersing peace. He is the one that is in charge of peace. He is the one that it sits back and says, okay, peace, I want you to go to them, 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 and then I want you to just to spread it out. In essence, he is the commander-in-chief over peace. But we forget that. And the great thing about it is Jesus knew we would forget about it. So before he was arrested in John chapter 16, verse 33, he says this. So listen, I've said all of these things to you. I've told you what's going to happen. I've said everything that I needed to say so that in me you may have peace. I've told you what was going to happen, and it may be one of those things that when you're hearing it, it's going to just change your perspective, and it's going to shift the focus off of everything going on when you're experiencing it. When I get arrested, your focus is not going to be on peace. It's not going to be on everything that you've experienced. It's not going to be on everything that you've seen. But I am telling you all of these things so that in me you may have peace. Why? Because everything that he said would happen, happened. Bringing it to that place of saying he was in control of it anyway. So why am I so worked up? I have no control over it. He steps up and says, I want you to understand, in this world, you're going to have tribulation. You're going to have trouble. But I need you to understand. I need you to have courage. I need you to take heart because I have overcome the world. He says, in this world, you're going to experience things. In this world, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have tribulation. Things are going to get rocky. It's going to get hard to deal with. But find peace in the fact that I have experienced everything that you experienced. I experienced temptation. I experienced the broken relationships. I experienced losing my family. I experienced losing my friends. I even experienced betrayal. I even experienced death. And I beat it all. So why is this so important? Jesus, in this short little verse, says something that we've heard a million times. He says, okay, in the world, bad things will happen. It's going to happen. But you get to choose whether or not you focus on it. You have control over one aspect of everything you will face in life. And it's whether or not you will sit there, set up shop, and focus on the negative that's going on in your life, on the strife, on the brokenness, every single bit of it. He says, but take heart because I've already overcome it. He says, if you will look to me and you will see that I have beaten all of this, then you can experience peace. If you will look to me and you will see the truth that I have already beaten all of this, and then you can move that belief, you can move that fact that I've beaten it, if you can move that thought process and take it and make it part of what you believe, then you can experience peace. Again, not a temporary peace, because peace has nothing to do. Peace itself has nothing to do with how we feel. Let me be honest. I have experienced stuff in my life that has left me shaken and has left me questioning everything about my faith. And has even left me going, God, if you do this, I will walk away from you forever. Just being honest. But even in those moments, I was able to look and see where God had been faithful to me over the years and where God had been faithful to my family. And I was able to take and move that and find some peace in the midst of all of the tragedy, all of the heartache, all of the heartbreak, all of the things that I never would have thought I would ever experience in my life. And I was able to find peace. What about you? Where are you at right now? Do you feel broken? Do you feel like the pieces of your life are just scattered across everything you know? Are you hurting? Are you sitting in a situation where you feel like you've just been beat up and battered and just tossed back and forth, and there's so much hurt there on a relational level from the people in your life? Maybe you're just not either one of those things. Maybe you're just mourning. Maybe this time of year makes you think about the people that you've lost and you're grieving. The reality is sometimes we do come into Christmas feeling like we shouldn't celebrate. And so what happens is we disengage. And it's in those moments that we have to remember why Jesus came to begin with. I read a story on Facebook about a week or so ago, and it was a young lady telling the story of the church that she was a part of. Her father was the pastor, and her father had made some very unwise decisions, and the church actually looked at him and said, we're going to need you to step back, and we don't want you at the Christmas Eve service. Yeah. And so he honored their wishes. He stepped back. He stayed home from the Christmas Eve service, but his daughter, he was like, they didn't say I couldn't go. And so she went and she sat there, and she just started feeling like she is just so overwhelmed by all the just stuff going on, and she just felt like she just couldn't engage in really worshiping and being a part of what was going on. And so she said that she started praying, and she's like, Jesus, I'm so sorry that I'm ruining your birthday party, because that's what we're having a birthday party for you, and I'm so sorry that I'm ruining it. And his response to her, she says she just felt it in her spirit say, you forgot why I came. See, when we're tempted to say, Jesus, I am so sorry for ruining your party. I'm so sorry that my emotions, my hurt, my anger, my bitterness, just everything about me right now is just drawing attention in my heart away from you, and I am ruining your party. We have to remember that Jesus didn't come for the celebration. He didn't come for the wise men to come and bring him gifts. He didn't come for the shepherds to come and see what was going on. He didn't come because the angels were going to come and appear and spread the news of what was happening. He didn't come because we would sit back for generations upon generations and put Christmas trees up and give gifts to each other. It's not why he came. He didn't come for the celebration. He came for those who were hurting and mourning and broken. That's why he came. He specifically came because he knew the cross was at the end of the road, and he came to become the center point of human history, to make it possible for us to have the peace that only he can bring. That's why he came. And when we truly focus on him, when we truly take the and I say take the blinders off, but when we truly put blinders on to everything else going on in our world, when we make that choice to say, you know what, I'm not going to focus on those things. I'm going to focus on a baby in a manger that eventually grew up, lived a sinless life, experienced everything that I have to experience in my life, and laid his life down for me. That's what I'm going to do. And we begin to experience peace because everything else just kind of fades away in comparison. And I get it. That's hard to do because we beat ourselves up over our shortcomings. Especially if at some point in your life you said, Jesus, I believe you are everything that you say you are. Because we look at it and we understand and we see how big of a sacrifice it was, and we understand the power of it. But then what happens is we fall, we fail, and we look at it and we go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then we start to beat ourselves up. Eventually we come back around and we say, nope, I'm good. But we can't help but beat ourselves up because we're human beings. Judas beat himself up to the point of taking his own life. My question is this: what are you focused on? Right now, what are you focused on? Are you focused on your brokenness? Are you focused on your hurt? Are you focused on your anger? Are you focused on your bitterness? Are you focused on the people that you've lost? Or are you actually trying to focus on Jesus this Christmas? Are you focusing on the parties? Are you focusing on the gifts? Are you focusing on the lights? Are you focusing on the reactions you might get? Or are you focusing on Jesus? The peace of Christmas is experienced when we let Jesus in. When we let Jesus into our mess, when we let Jesus into our brokenness, when we let Jesus into our addictions, when we let Jesus into the hurt, when we let Jesus into our betrayals and let him do what he does, peace comes. So what are you focused on? This Christmas, where are you focusing? Is Jesus at the center of your home? Is Jesus at the center of your heart? And really, even as weird as it sounds, is Jesus at the center for you in terms of church? Is Jesus at the center of everything for you this Christmas? If he's not, you're shortchanging yourself. And the relationship that you have with him will never fulfill what you need it to. Even if you're a believer. Wait, I can be a believer and not be focused? Yes. You can believe that Jesus is who he says he is, but still be focused on other stuff. But until you focus that on him, you will never experience life to the full, the way that he desires for it to be. So what are you focused on? And are you willing to say, Jesus, be the center of my everything. Be the center of my attention. Be my focus. Be the thing that I can't get away from. Because I need to experience the joy that you bring into my life, and I absolutely need to experience the peace that only you can bring. If you're here this morning and you say, whoa, this is all brand new to me, then when we kick out of here, when we dismiss, come find me. Ask me any questions you have, and I will do my best to answer them. And if I don't know the answer, I'll be honest with you and say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that. Let me do some digging, and I'll get back to you. Or maybe you're here this morning and you say, you know what, I'm a believer, and I realize that I need to focus my attention. Then in just a minute, when we sing, I want to encourage you to do something. It's going to be out of the norm. It's going to be out of your comfort zone. But I want you to come down here. And I want you, during this last song, I want you to join with us up here singing your heart out. Jesus, be the center of my life, be the center of my heart, and even be the center of my church. Because until we focus on him, until he is there, until we let him into everything, we will never experience the peace that Christmas was designed to bring into our world. Father, thank you for who you are. I thank you that you and you alone are the Prince of Peace, that you and you alone are able and capable of commanding the peace that we so desperately need. I pray this morning, as we wind down, I pray that you will reach into our hearts and into our lives, and I pray that you will shake us to the core, and that we will shift our focus and our attention to you, because you and you alone are worthy of our everything. In Jesus' holy name, amen.